Tom, we want to go broad with you and the holdings that you have and the tactics that you deploy with Baillie Gifford. But on a moment where we do see war, of course, between Israel at the moment and Hamas, how are you thinking about that implicating some of the companies with which do business in the area, or whether or not it does change your sentiment on technology writ large?
Well, I think it's obviously a dreadful situation, but actually understanding what the long-term implications of what's happening will be is just going to take time. And so the starting point from my perspective is that you just take your time and ask the question, what's really going on here? And actually reacting, trying to think you know better than the market in the short run is not the right way to generate returns for your clients.
Tom, a question posed on Bloomberg Television throughout the day has been defense stocks or defense technology stocks, and how much, I guess, of a knee-jerk reaction it would be to think about that as a sector. What is your attitude towards defense?
Well, I think we own no defense stocks as the starting point, but I think you can see that there is clear pressure for NATO countries to increase their spending on this area. That there have clearly been shortages in a number of areas that is going to require a structurally higher level of spend. So there is an interesting argument there, but I think as you in the way you asked the question about technology, I think one of the things that we've learned in Ukraine over the past 18 months is that actually things have moved on a lot. Whether at drones as an example of that, in the way that wars are being fought. So actually, as in most other areas, thinking carefully about how technology can have transformational impacts is just as important in defense as it is elsewhere. It's not about sort of taking that top-down view and making an allocation.
Tom, talking of allocation, we're looking at some of the key holdings that you have, of course, a Trade Desk, Shopify, NVIDIA, Amazon. I mean, NVIDIA, of course, an extraordinary rocket ship to have been aligning yourself with of late when that comes to elements of AI, but also geopolitically encircled when we think about its exposure to China. How do you discern which companies are the ones which you want to be seeing, emboldening, and indeed allocating money towards?
Well, I think if you stick with that example of NVIDIA, we bought the stock in 2016, and we've been holders of it continuously since. And the investment thesis is around the application of their technology. And if you go back to 2016, yes, there was this opportunity in AI, but it's also in the data center, in self-driving vehicles, in AR, VR. So a technology which has really broad application. And then where you find a company that addresses such a big opportunity, the question is really, how do you hold on to it? Because yes, you take this as an example of one we've done well in that intervening 7 years. It's actually been a really quite difficult stock to hold on to. I think the peak to trough decline from 21 to 22 was 66%. So how do you endure losing 2/3 of your money through that period of ownership? And that is really about hold discipline. The market likes to talk about sell discipline. Why do you sell a stock? That always seems back to front to me. I think the discipline is in being able to own it through those difficult periods where your investment thesis, where your assessment of the upside is unchanged. And so that's, I think, the crucial characteristic of the way that we invest on behalf of our clients.
Tom and Caroline, a piece of news overnight, by the way, NVIDIA cancelled its AI summit, which had been scheduled for October 15th and 16th in Tel Aviv. And Jensen Huang was due to give a keynote. So just sort of updating our audience on that. Makes me think about supply chain. Let's go back to Israel, Tom. Intel had talked about expanding wafer fab operations there. There's talent there on autonomy. Mobileye, its biggest company by market cap, US listed. Is there a supply chain story here?
Well, I think that the big supply chain story in semiconductors has really been driven domestically in the US with the Inflation Reduction Act. And what I observe is a huge amount of investment now going into this crucial and particularly sensitive area to drive a much more local supply chain. And I think it's much more complex than just adding capacity. because there's all the training and upskilling that you need to do because of that. But I think this is, what the events of the past few days are just another example of why that is so important strategically for the US. And then it's thinking through, well, who are the beneficiaries there? Who are the ones that can actually enable that policy? Because when there is so much investment going in, it's always interesting to follow the money. Where are the opportunities being created? And I think domestically in America, that's one that's really interesting.